Hey guys, tonight we step into the muddy boots of a medieval peasant, scraping by on a diet of thin porridge, hard bread, and a stubborn flicker of hope. Picture yourself in a damp, straw-roofed hut, the air thick with smoke and the faint sourness of boiled oats. Your stomach grumbles as dawn creeps through the cracks in the wattle and daub walls, and you're already dreading the watery slop that's breakfast, lunch, and probably dinner. Life's tough, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this grind without some serious grit. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to a world painted in grays and browns, the kind of dawn that feels more like a grudge than a promise. The year's somewhere around 1350, and you're a tenant farmer in a muddy English village, or maybe a serf tied to a lord's land in France. Doesn't matter much. Hunger's the same everywhere. Your bed's a straw pallet, lumpy and crawling with fleas, and the cold seeps into your bones as you shuffle toward the hearth. The fire's barely alive, a few red embers winking like they're mocking your empty belly. You grab a chipped clay pot, half filled with water from yesterday's trek to the stream, and toss in a handful of oats. This is your morning ritual. Thin porridge, the cornerstone of a poor man's diet, a dish so bland it's practically an insult to taste buds. The oats are coarse, milled by hand on a quern stone that's older than your grandfather. You stir them into the water, watching the mixture turn into a grayish sludge. No salt, no herbs, no butter. Those are for the Lord's table, not yours. If you're lucky, maybe there's a scrap of onion or a wilted leek from last week's garden haul. But today, it's just oats and water. You blow on the steam, more out of habit than hope, and take a sip. It's warm, at least, but it sits in your gut like a wet stone. This is no hearty oatmeal commercial. This is survival, one spoonful at a time. A mainstream fact to ground us. Medieval peasants consumed about 3,000 calories daily when food was available, mostly from grains like oats, barley, or rye, because meat was a rare luxury reserved for feast days or the wealthy. You glance at the rest of your hut. Your wife's still asleep, curled up with the kids under a threadbare blanket. You don't wake them yet. Let them dream of full bellies a little longer. The kids will get their share of porridge, maybe a bit more than you, because you've seen what hunger does to their eyes. Outside, the rooster's crowing, but it's not some charming farmyard vibe. That bird's scrawny, and you're half tempted to wring its neck for stew, except it's the only thing laying eggs this month. Eggs, by the way, are a treat. Maybe once a week if the hens are feeling generous. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believe eating eggs on Fridays could anger the saints, so they trade them for a crust of bread instead. Superstition's a powerful spice when you've got nothing else. You choke down another spoonful, wincing as a grain catches in your throat. The texture's like chewing gravel, but you're used to it. Your teeth ache, probably from grinding that quernstone's dust into your bread last week. Dentists aren't a thing, and if your tooth goes bad, you'll yank it out with a string and a prayer. Historians still argue whether malnutrition or disease kill more peasants, but you're living proof it's a team effort. Your ribs show through your tunic, and your legs feel wobbly, like they're plotting a strike. But you can't stop. There's a field to plow, a lord to appease, and a family feed, all on this pathetic bowl of mush. Let's talk about this porridge for a sec. It's not just breakfast. It's your lifeline. Oats are cheap, they store well, and they fill you up, kind of. You'd kill for a bit of bacon fat to swirl in, but that's a pipe dream. Instead, you're stuck with what the land gives you, and the land's not exactly generous. Your tiny plot, maybe an acre if the Lord's feeling kind, grows enough oats or barley to keep you going through winter, but only if the rains don't drown the crop or the mice don't beat you to it. Last year, You lost half your harvest to mildew, and the memory still stings worse than the hunger. You joke to yourself, at least the mice eat better than me. But it's not really funny when your stomach's staging a revolt. You finish the porridge, scraping the pot clean with a wooden spoon. Every grain counts. You're already thinking about the day ahead, trudging to the fields, dodging the bailiff's glare, maybe sneaking a turnip from the Lord's garden if you're feeling reckless. But for now, you sit in the quiet. The fires crackle your only company. You wonder the monks of the nearby abbey are eating better. Probably, with their vegetable gardens and fish ponds. You'd heard a rumor they brew ale with honey, and the thought makes your mouth water. Ale's another staple, but yours is weak, cloudy stuff, more water than barley. Still, it's better than nothing, and it dulls the ache in your gut. The kids stir and you force a smile. Porridge is ready, you call, keeping your voice light. They don't need to know how much you're rationing, how you skipped your share yesterday to stretch the bag of oats. You pour their portions smaller than you'd like and watch them eat. Their faces are smudged with dirt, but they're alive, and that's enough for now. You think about the stories your grandmother told. Tales of fairies leaving milk and bread for good folk. You snort. The only thing fairies leave you is bad luck and a leaky roof. But hope's a stubborn thing, isn't it? You hold on to it, like a seed tucked in your pocket, waiting for a better season. Outside, the village is waking up. You hear the clank of a neighbor's bucket, the low of a cow that's more bone than beef. You've got a long day ahead, and this porridge is all you got to fuel it. You tie your shoes, more like leather scraps stitched with sinew, and step into the cold. The air smells of mud and manure, but there's a hint of spring, a green whisper that says maybe, just maybe, the harvest will be better this year. You cling to that thought, because without it, you're just a man with a spoon and an empty bowl. You trudge through the village, boots squelching in the mud, your stomach still grumbling despite that sad bowl of porridge. The sun's barely up, but you're headed to the common bakehouse, where the air smells of charred wood and desperation. Bread's next on your daily grind. Hard, gritty bread that's more punishment than food. You got a sack of rye flour slung over your shoulder, ground from last month's harvest after the Lord took his cut. Your hands ache just thinking about the kneading ahead. But bread's your anchor, the one thing that keeps you from keeling over in the fields. You mutter a half-joking prayer. God, make this loaf softer than my landlord heart. Spoiler, it won't be. The bakehouse is a squat stone building, its chimney puffing smoke like an overworked dragon. You nod to your neighbor, Agnes, who's already elbow-deep in dough. She's got flour in her hair and a scowl that could curdle milk. The oven's a communal deal. Everyone pitches in wood to keep it hot, and you pay a fee in flour to use it. It's a rip-off, but what choice do you have? You can't afford your own oven, and the Lord's bailiff would fine you for baking at home anyway. A mainstream fact. Most medieval villages had a single bakehouse, controlled by the manor, ensuring peasants stayed dependent on the Lord's infrastructure. You dump your flour onto the wooden table, worn smooth by years of angry kneading. Rise your grain, cheaper than wheat, tougher than barley. It's dark, coarse stuff, full of grit from the millstone. You've heard tales of city folk eating white bread. Soft as a cloud, but that's as real to you as a unicorn. You mix in water from a bucket, cloudy, but you're past caring, and a pinch of salt you barter for last week. No yeast. You're using a sour starter, a bubbling lump of dough you've kept alive longer than some of your chickens. A quirky tidbit. Peasants sometimes hid their starter in their beds to keep it warm, believing it brought luck. You tried that once, but all it brought was crumbs and a cranky wife. Kneading's a battle. The dough's sticky at first, then stubborn, fighting your hands like it knows it's doomed to be rock hard. Your arms burn, and sweat beads on your forehead despite the morning chill. You lean into it, palms grinding against the table, your breath coming in huffs. Agnes mutters about her husband eating their last loaf in one sitting, and you chuckle. Mine's the same, but he blames the dog. It's a weak joke, but it cuts the tension. You're all in this together, hungry, tired, and hoping the oven doesn't scorch your bread again. The dough's finally smooth, or as smooth as rye gets. You shape it into a round loaf, slashing across on top with your knife. Superstition says it wards off evil spirits. You just hope it helps it bake evenly. You carry it to the oven where the baker, old Hugh, with a face like a dried apple, shoves it in with a long peel. The heat hits you like a slap, and you step back, wiping your brow. Now you wait. The bakehouse hums with low chatter, the clunk of wooden bowls, the hiss of dough hitting hot stone. You lean against the wall, your legs aching from yesterday's plowing. Historians still argue whether bread or porridge was the medieval peasant's main calorie source. But for you, it's a tie. Both are miserable, but both keep you alive. You think back to that porridge from dawn, how it barely filled a hole in your gut. Bread's supposed to be the heavy hitter, but heavy is the key word. Last week's loaf was so dense you could have used it to patch your roof. You joke to yourself, if the harvest fails, I'll just chuck bread at the invaders. But the thought sours fast. A bad harvest means no flour, no bread, no nothing. You've seen it before, villages where the bakehouse went cold, and folks ate grass to survive. You shake off the memory, focusing on the oven's glow. Hope's a fragile thing, but the smell of baking bread gives it a little muscle. Old Hugh calls your name, and you grab your loaf. It's hot, heavy, and dark as sin, with a crust like armor. You tap it, sounds like a door knock. Not promising, but it's yours. You wrap it in a cloth and head home, the weight tugging at your shoulder. The village is waking up now. Kids chasing a scrawny pig, women hauling water from a well. You pass the manor house, its windows glowing with candlelight. You bet the Lord's eating wheat bread with butter, maybe even cheese. Your mouth waters, but you shove the thought down. Envy's a luxury you can't afford. Back in your hut, you set the loaf on the table. Your wife's up, stirring another pot of porridge, because, yeah, it's that kind of day. The kids are the bread like it's a feast, and you feel a pang. You'll cut it tonight, when everyone's together, to make it feel special. For now, you hide it under a cloth, away from mice and sticky fingers. You sit for a moment, sipping weak ale from a cup. It's sour, barely alcoholic, but it takes the edge off. You think about the dough again, how it fought you, how it's fighting to keep you alive. Bread's not just food. It's a contract between you and the land, the Lord, the sky itself. You glance at the hearth, where the porridge pot's simmering. It's the same gray slop from breakfast, and you groan inwardly. If I see another oat, I'll start growing sprouts, you mutter, and your wife snorts. It's a small win, making her laugh. You're both tired, both hungry, but you've got this loaf, this moment. The bread's still warm, its crust cracking softly as it cools. You imagine slicing it later, the crumb dense but filling, maybe with a smear of fat if you're lucky. It's not much, but it's enough to get you to tomorrow. You stand, stretching your aching back. The fields are calling, and the Lord's bailiff won't care that you're running on fumes. You grab your sickle and head out, the bread's weight lingering in your mind. It's not just a loaf. It's hours of grinding, kneading, waiting, hoping. You think about Agnes, old Hugh, the oven's heat, and how you're all tied to this cycle. The village smells of smoke and earth, and you breathe it in, grounding yourself. That bread's your shield against the hunger gnawing at you, and you'll fight for every crumb. You're back in your hut, the evening shadows stretching long across the dirt floor, your new loaf still hidden under its cloth like buried treasure. The porridge pot's empty, scraped clean hours ago, and your stomach's already whispering complaints. But tonight's not about food. It's about hope, that slippery, Stubborn spark that keeps you going when the oats run low and the bread's harder than a tax collector's stare. You sit on a wobbly stool, your hands rough from the day's work in the fields, and you let your mind wander. Hope's a strange beast, part dream, part delusion, all survival. You joke to yourself, hope's the only thing hungrier than me, but there's truth in it. Without it, you have given up years ago. The kids are playing outside, chasing each other with sticks, their laughter sharp against the village's quiet. Your wife's mending a tunic by the hearth, her needle flashing in the firelight. The scene's almost cozy, except for the cold seeping through the walls and the ache in your gut. You think about what keeps you tethered to this life. The promise of a better harvest, a milder winter, maybe a day when the Lord forgets to demand his tithe. Hope's not just wishful thinking. It's the glue holding your world together, a mainstream fact. Medieval peasants often relied on religious faith to cope with hardship, praying for divine intervention to bring rain or spare their crops from blight. You lean back, your stool creaking, and let your eyes drift to the ceiling. The thatch is patchy, letting in drafts and the occasional raindrop. You've heard stories, half-whispered at the alehouse, about peasants who struck it lucky. A man in the next village found a silver coin in his field, enough to buy a cow. Another son caught the eye of a monk and got sent to a monastery, where they eat fish on Fridays and sleep on real beds. You don't believe half of it, but the stories are like kindling for that spark in your chest. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants thought burying a toad under their hearth brought prosperity, claiming it charmed the soil. You haven't tried it yet, but you're not above tossing a frog in the fire if things get desperate. Hope's tricky, though. It's not just dreaming of full bellies or warm cloaks. It's the small stuff, too. Hoping your shoes hold out another month. Hoping the kids don't catch the cough going around. Hoping the bailiff doesn't notice you skipped a day's labor to fix your roof. You glance at your wife, her face soft in the firelight, and feel a pang. You hope she doesn't notice how little you ate today, how you gave your share to the kids. She's your anchor, but even anchors can wear thin. You crack a joke to lighten the mood. If hope was bread, we'd be fatter than the Lord's pigs. She rolls her eyes, but her lips twitch, and that's enough. Outside, the kids' laughter fades as they tumble back inside, cheeks red from the cold. They're skinny, their tunics patched, but their eyes are bright. You see hope in them, too, the way they talk about catching a rabbit tomorrow or finding a nest of eggs. You don't have the heart to tell them rabbits are faster than dreams, or that the hens haven't laid in weeks. Instead, you ruffle their hair and promise a story later, maybe the one about the giant who traded his gold for a loaf of bread. Historians still argue whether hope or fear drove peasants more, whether it was faith in God's mercy or dread of starvation that kept them plowing. You're betting on hope, but it's a close race. You stand, stretching your aching back, and move to the table. Time to cut that bread you baked this morning. You unwrap the loaf, its crust rough under your fingers, and grab your knife. The kids crowd around, eyes wide, like you're carving a roast instead of a lump of rye. You slice carefully, each piece thin to make it last. The crumbs dense, flecked with grit, but it smells like survival. You hand out the slices, keeping the smallest for yourself. The kids chew slowly, savoring it, and you feel that spark flicker brighter. This bread, this moment, it's proof you're still fighting. You sit back down, nibbling your share. It's tough, catchy in your teeth, but it's better than nothing. You think about tomorrow, another day of plowing, another bowl of porridge, another round of hope in the sky doesn't turn against you. The village is full of people like you, clinging to their own sparks. There's Agnes, who hopes her daughter marries a freeman. Old Hugh, who hopes his bad leg holds out another season. Even the priest, who hopes his sermons keep the Lord's favor. You're all in this dance, stepping to the same grim tune. The fire's dying now, the hut growing colder. You pull your cloak tighter. It's scratchy but warm. You think about the land outside, the fields you've worked since you were a boy. They're stingy, those fields, giving just enough to keep you alive. But every spring, you plant again, hoping for a bumper crop. You've seen it happen once, maybe twice, a harvest so good you ate porridge with milk for a week. The memory is like a warm coal, and you hold it close. You joke, if hope was a crop, I'd be the richest man in the Shire. Your wife snorts and the kids giggle, and for a second, the hut feels full. You glance at the bread again, half the loaf still left. It's a small victory, but you'll take it. Hope's not about grand promises. It's about these moments, these slivers of maybe. You think about the alehouse tales again, the ones about lost treasures or kind strangers. They're probably nonsense, but they keep you listening, keep you dreaming. You've got your own tale, too. The day you found a wild apple tree, it's fruit tart but sweet, enough to make the kids smile for days. You hold on to that, because hope's a seed, and you're too stubborn to let it die. The kids are yawning now, their eyelids heavy. You herd them to the pallet, tucking them under the blanket. Your wife joins you, her hand brushing yours, and you feel that spark again. You're tired, hungry, cold, but you're here, and that's enough. You lie down, the straw crackling under you, and stare at the dark. Tomorrow's another fight, but you've got hope, that quiet, stubborn thing, whispering you'll make it through. You're up before dawn again, the cold biting your fingers as you pull on your tattered cloak and step into the village square. The market's buzzing today, a rare break from the fields, and you're here to barter for whatever scraps you can afford. The air's thick with the smell of mud, sweat, and overripe turnips, and the crowd's a jumble of peasants, peddlers, and the occasional pilgrim with a holier-than-thou smirk. Your sack's light, just a few eggs from your scrawny hen, and a handful of wilted herbs. But you're hoping it's enough to trade for something to stretch tomorrow's porridge. You mutter, if I swap an egg for a carrot, I'm basically a merchant prince. The joke's flat, but it keeps you moving. The market's a chaotic patchwork. Stalls of wobbly planks, baskets of shriveled vegetables, and cages of squawking chickens. You weave through, eyes sharp for a deal. There's old Meg, hawking cabbages that look like they've seen better days, and a fishmonger with a single carp that's more scale than meat. Your stomach growls, loud enough to make a passing dog tilt its head. You've got no coin, barter's the game here, but you're good at haggling. A mainstream fact. Medieval village markets were vital for peasants who traded goods like eggs, wool, or labor to supplement their meager diets, since cash was scarce. You approach Meg's stall, holding up your eggs like they're royal jewels. She squints, her face a map of wrinkles, and offers a single cabbage half wilted. You scoff, pointing out its leaves look like they've been nibbled by every worm in the Shire. She counters with a turnip, small but firm. You hesitate. Eggs are precious, but turnip could thicken tonight's porridge. You hand over 2 eggs, and she tosses you the turnip with a grunt. Victory, sort of. You tuck it into your sack, already calculating how to slice it thin enough to feed 4. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believe turnips warded off bad spirits if you carved a face into them. You're not carving this one. It's too valuable to waste on ghosts. The market's noise is relentless. Hawkers shouting, babies crying, a drunk singing off-key about a lost cow. You spot a peddler with a cart of dried peas, and your heart skips. Peas are gold. They store well, boil soft, and fill the kids' bellies. But he wants wool, and you've got none. You offer your herbs, wild thyme you picked last week, but he laughs, saying they're half dead. You shrug and move on, hiding your sting of defeat. Historians still argue whether markets helped or hurt peasants more. Did they offer fair trade, or just another way for lords and merchants to skim off the top? You're leaning toward the latter, but you're here anyway, chasing that slim chance of a better meal. You pause by a baker's stall, the smell of fresh bread hitting you like a warm wave. These loaves are wheat, golden and soft, nothing like your rye brick. You imagine sinking your teeth into one, the crust crackling, the crumb light as a cloud. But one look at the baker's face, smug, knowing you can't afford it, snaps you back. You joke to yourself, if I steal that loaf, I'll be dining in the stocks tonight. Instead, you barter your last egg for a small, stale heel of rye bread, probably left over from yesterday. It's hard as a rock, but it'll soften in porridge. You slip it into your sack, dodging a kid who's chasing a runaway goose. The market's not just about food. It's gossip, news, hope in disguise. You overhear two women whispering about a peddler who sold magic beans that grew overnight. You roll your eyes. Sounds like a scam, but you get it. People here are desperate for miracles. You listen closer as they talk about the Lord's new tax. A penny per household, due next month. Your stomach twists. A penny might as well be a castle. You push through the crowd, past a juggler tossing apples. Apples you'd kill to taste but can't touch. You settle for watching, letting the bright arch distract you from the ache in your gut. You try one last stall, a woman selling leeks and onions. She's got a kind face, which is rare here. You offer your time, and she hesitates, then hands you a single leek, skinny but green. You thank her, almost meaning it, and head back toward the square's edge. The leek's a small win, enough to flavor tomorrow's pot and maybe make the kids smile. You think back to that porridge from yesterday, how it needed something, anything, to taste like more than despair. This leak's your answer, at least for a day. The sun's climbing now, and the market's thinning out. You've got your turnip, your stale bread, your leek. Not bad for a morning's work, but not enough to quiet the hunger that's already clawing back. You pass a priest blessing a pile of moldy carrots, and you snort. Bless my stomach while you're at it. You mutter under your breath. It's a cheap jab, but it feels good. The church is always promising salvation, but you'd settle for a full belly. You sling your sack over your shoulder. It's weight lighter than you'd hoped, and start the trek home. The village looks smaller from the square. Its huts huddled like tired old men. You think about the bread waiting at home, the one you baked yesterday. It's no wheat loaf, but it's yours, and with this leek, maybe dinner won't be a total loss. You walk past a manor house. Its chimneys smoking, probably roasting something you'll never taste. You shake off the bitterness, focusing on the leek, the turnip, the kids' faces when they see you brought something new, hopes in the little things today, and you're clutching it tight. You're almost home when you hear a shout. A peddler's cart tipped over, spilling cabbages into the mud. The crowd scrambles, some helping, some grabbing what they can. You keep walking. You got enough trouble without stealing someone else's. Back in your hut, you set your spoils on the table. Your wife raises an eyebrow at the leek, and you grin. Feast fit for a king, you say, and she laughs, a sound rarer than meat. You sit, already planning tomorrow's market trip, hoping for a better trade, a kinder peddler, a miracle in vegetable form. You're out in the fields now, the sun beating down like it's got a personal grudge. Your hands grip a wooden plow, its blade duller than the bailiff's wit, and you're dragging it through soil that's more rock than earth. This is where your food begins, not in the pot, but here, in the sweat-soaked struggle to coax a crop from land that seems to hate you. Your back aches, your boots are caked with mud, and your stomach's still sour from this morning's porridge. You mutter, if I grow wings before wheat, I'm flying to a better shire. It's a weak joke, but out here, alone with the crows, it's all you've got. The field's yours. Well, sort of. You work for the Lord, who claims half your harvest before you even see it. What's left is barely enough for your family, let alone the mice who think your grain sack is a buffet. You're sowing barley today, scattering seeds in furrows you clawed open with this sorry plow. Each seed's a gamble. Too much rain and they rot. Too little and they shrivel. A mainstream fact. Medieval peasants farmed using the three-field system, rotating crops like barley, oats, and legumes to keep the soil from giving up entirely. It's clever, but it doesn't make the work any lighter. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and squint at the horizon. The field stretches on, patched with weeds and hope. You've been at this since you were a boy, learning from your father, who learned from his. He used to say the land's a jealous lover. Give it everything and it might still betray you. He wasn't wrong. Last year's blight took a third of your oats, leaving you with porridge so thin it was practically water. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants swore by planting during a full moon, believing it made crops stronger. You tried it once, but the only thing that grew was your wife's skepticism. The plow snags on a rock, jarring your arms. You curse under your breath, PG-13 style, since the kids might hear worse at the alehouse. You kneel, prying the stone free with your hands. It's big, sharp, and useless, like half the promises the Lord makes about fair shares. You toss it to the field's edge, where a pile of its cousins grows. The crows watch, caw like they're laughing at your misery. You joke, keep laughing, and you're tomorrow's stew. They don't blink, and you get back to work, because daydreaming about crow pie won't feed anyone. Your mind wanders as you sow, scattering seeds with rhythm born of years. You think about the market yesterday, that leek you bartered for, now waiting to jazz up tonight's slop. It's a small thing, but it keeps you going. Out here, hope's tied to the dirt. Every seed's a maybe, every furrow a prayer. Historians still argue whether peasants were more tied to the land or the Lord's whims. You'd say both, but the land's the one breaking your back right now. You've seen men lose their plots for missing a tithe, their families sent to beg. You won't let that be you, not while you got strength to push this plow. The sun's climbing, and your throat's dry as old bread. You've got a water skin, but it's half empty, and the stream's too far to refill now. You take a sip, wincing at the stale taste, and keep moving. The field's not big, maybe a half acre, but it feels like a kingdom when you're plowing alone. Your neighbors are out, too, their figures bent in distant fields. You wave to John, whose ox died last month. He's pulling his own plow now, and you don't know how he's still standing. You'd help, but your own work's crushing you. Community's nice, but hunger's a solo fight. You think back to that bread you baked. It's crust like armor. It's waiting at home, a reminder you're not just a beast of burden. But out here, it's easy to forget. The land demands everything. Your sweat, your time. Your hope? You scatter another handful of seeds, watching them disappear into the dirt. Some won't sprout. Others will feed the birds. But a few might make it, might become the barley that fills your pot next winter. You cling to that, because giving up means starving, and you're too stubborn for that. A cloud passes, offering a moment's shade. You straighten, stretching your screaming back, and glance at the manor house in the distance. Its walls are stone, its fields worked by men like you, but its tables grown with meat and wine. You imagine the Lord eating barley bread, not your gritty kind, but soft, slathered with butter. Your stomach twists, and you shove the thought down. Envy's a weed, and you got enough of those already. You joke, if I plant envy, I'll harvest a castle. It's nonsense, but it keeps your hands moving. The day drags on, the sun relentless. Your seeds are running low, and the field's almost done. You're tired, filthy, and hungry, but there's a quiet pride in seeing those furrows lined up, each one a step toward survival. You think about the kids, how they'll ask about the crops tonight, their eyes wide like you're a wizard making food from dirt. You'll tell them a story, maybe about a seed that grew into a tree of bread. They'll laugh, and you'll feel that spark of hope flicker, the one you stoke out here, seed by seed. You finish the last furrow, your hands blistered, your body begging for rest. The crows are still watching, and you give them a mock salute. Enjoy the show, you say, slinging the plow over your shoulder. You head home. The field behind you a patchwork of maybe. The village smells of smoke and supper, and you quicken your pace, thinking of that leek, that bread, that family waiting. The land's a hard master, but it's yours, and you'll fight for every grain it gives. You're hunched over the hearth in your hut, the fire a pitiful flicker that barely warms your hands. The pot's on, bubbling with the same old oats, water, and that precious leek you scored at the market. The smell's almost good, but it's still just porridge, the thin, gray ghost of a meal that haunts your days. Your wife's at the table, slicing yesterday's bread into chunks so hard they could double as doorstops. The kids are outside, their voices faint as they chase a stray cat, and you're stirring this pot like it's your life's work. You mutter, "If I stir any harder, I'll churn butter out of this slop." It's a lame joke, but it keeps the gloom at bay. The hearth is the heart of your home, a smoky, sooty corner where every meal is born and most of your hopes die. The fire's weak tonight, fed with damp twigs because good wood's for the Lord Hall. You toss in another stick, watching it hiss like it's protesting. The leek's green scent rises, a faint promise of flavor, but you know it won't mask the truth. This porridge is barely food, a mainstream fact. Hearths in medieval peasant homes were central for cooking and heat, often just an open fire on a stone slab, with smoke escaping through a hole in the roof, or not, leaving your eyes stinging and your lungs grumpy. You stir slowly, the wooden spoon worn smooth from years of the same dance. The oats are swelling, turning the water into a gloopy mess. You think about that turnip from the market, still tucked away for tomorrow. You could add it now, make this meal a little heartier, but you hold off. Stretching food is a game of patience, and you're a master at it. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believe stirring porridge clockwise brought good luck, while counterclockwise invited disaster. You're stirring clockwise, just in case, though you suspect the only disaster here is the meal itself. The fire spits, and a spark lands on your hand. You flinch, but don't stop stirring. Pain's just part of the deal. Calluses, blisters, and hunger pangs are your old friends. You glance at your wife, who's muttering about the bread's crust being tougher than the bailiff's temper. You grin. "At least it keeps our teeth sharp," you say. And she snorts, a sound that's worth more than a full pot. The kids burst in muddy and breathless, their eyes locking onto the pot like it's a feast. You don't have the heart to tell them it's the same as yesterday, just with a leek's cameo. You ladle out the porridge, careful to make each portion equal. The kids get theirs first, their small hands clutching bowls like treasures. You take the smallest share, as always, and sit by the hearth, the warmth barely reaching your bones. The leek adds a faint oniony bite, a step up from the usual bland mush. You chew slowly, pretending it's a meal, not a necessity. Historians still argue whether spices and herbs were common in peasant diets. Some say only the wealthy had them. Others claim foraged greens were a poor man's seasoning. You're proof of the latter, but a leek's no saffron, and you're no lord. The bread's on the table, and you break off a piece. It's like chewing gravel, but you dunk in the porridge to soften it. The kids are eating fast, scraping their bowls clean, and you feel that familiar tug. Hope mixed with guilt. You're keeping them alive, but barely. You think back to the fields you plowed yesterday, those seeds you planted with a whispered prayer. If they grow, if the rains come, if the Lord doesn't take it all, maybe you'll have enough to make thicker porridge, maybe even with milk. You joke to yourself, if I dream of milk, does that count as dessert? It's a flicker of humor to keep the dark at bay. The hut's quiet now, just a crackle of the fire and the soft clink of spoons. Your wife catches your eye, and you share a look that says everything. We're still here, still fighting. The hearth's glow paints her face soft, and for a moment, You forget the cold, the hunger, the endless grind. You think about the stories you heard as a kid, tales of fairies leaving bowls of cream by hearths like this one. You'd settle for a single spoonful, but the thought makes you smile. The kids are yawning, their bowls empty, and you herd them toward the pallet. You bank the fire, saving what's left of the embers for morning. The smoke curls up, stinging your eyes, and you cough, wishing for a proper chimney. The Lord Hall has won, you've heard, along with tables groaning under roast pig and spice wine. You push the thought away. It's a path to bitterness, and you've got enough to carry. Instead, you focus on the pot, now empty but for a crust of dried oats. You'll soak it tomorrow, make it last another day. Every scrap counts, every ember, every hope. You sit back, the stool creaking under you. The hut smells of smoke and leaks, a faint echo of the meal you just shared. You think about that bread again, how it fought you at the bakehouse, how it's fighting now to keep your family going. The heart's dying glow feels like a mirror, weak but stubborn, refusing to go out. You glance at your wife, now mending a sock by candlelight, and feel that spark again. Tomorrow's another day of porridge, another day of hoping. But tonight, you've got this moment, this warmth, this family. You're shivering in your hut, the winter wind sneaking through the cracks like a thief. The heart's down to a few sullen embers, and your breath hangs in the air, a ghostly reminder of the cold that's settled into your bones. Your diet's taken a grim turn. Thinner porridge, harder bread, and hope that's starting to feel like a cruel joke. Famine's not just a word this season. It's a shadow, stalking your village like a wolf. The harvest was meager. The Lord took his share, and now you're rationing oats like they're gold dust. You mutter, if hunger was a crop, I'd be harvesting acres. It's a bleak jest, but out here, humor's the only thing colder than the weather. The pot's on the hearth, but it's barely a meal, just a handful of oats and water, stretched so thin it's more soup than porridge. You stir it, watching the grains dissolve into a watery haze. Your wife's at the table, cutting a loaf that's more husk than bread, her hands trembling from the chill. The kids are bundled under a blanket, too quiet, their eyes big with the kind of hunger that hurts to see. A mainstream fact. Famines were common in the medieval period, often triggered by bad weather or war, with the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 killing thousands across Europe as crops failed and prices soared. You add a pinch of foraged nettles to the pot. Their sharp green sent a faint rebellion against the blandness. They're free, at least, plucked from the woods despite the frost. A quirky tidbit. Peasants sometimes ate nettles or even tree bark during famines, believing they'd fill the belly or at least trick it into silence. You're not at bark-eating stage yet, but it's closer than you like. The nettles sting your fingers as you toss them in, a small price for a meal that might keep you going another day. You stir, the spoon scraping the pot's bottom, and wish for the leak from last week, now a distant memory. The kids shuffle over, clutching their bowls. You ladle out the porridge, giving them the lion's share, though it's barely enough to wet their tongues. You take a sip yourself, wincing at the bitter nettle taste. It's not food, it's survival, dressed up as a meal. Your wife hands you a sliver of bread, so stale it crumbles like ash. You dunk it in the porridge, hoping it'll soften, but it's like chewing a frozen boot. You joke, if we survive this winter, I'm baking bread with gold. The kids giggle, but it's weak and your heart twists. They're too young for this fight, but famine doesn't care. Outside, the village is a ghost of itself. The fields are bare, dusted with snow that hides the failed crops. The market's empty. No peddlers, no turnips, no hope of a barter. You've seen neighbors eating things you wouldn't feed a pig. Grass, acorns, once even a dead crow. You're not there yet, but the thought creeps in uninvited. Historians still argue whether famine deaths came more from starvation or disease. Malnutrition made every cough a death sentence. You feel it in your own body, the way your legs wobble, the way your head spins when you stand too fast. But you keep stirring, keep moving, because stopping means giving up. You think back to the summer, those fields you plowed with such care. The barley looked promising then, green and swaying, but the rains came too late, then too much. Half the crop rotted. The rest went to the Lord or the mice. You've got a sack of oats hidden under the floor, but it's dwindling and spring's months away. You glance at your wife, her face pale in the firelight, and feel a surge of stubbornness. You'll outlast this winter, you tell yourself, even if it means eating snow and prayers. The kids finish their porridge, licking the bowls clean. You force a smile, telling them a story about a winter when the fairies brought honey to good folk. They listen, eyes wide, and you wish you believed it yourself. The bread's gone now, and you're already dreading tomorrow's meal. Probably just nettles again, unless you get lucky foraging. You joke, maybe I'll find a fairy's pantry in the woods. Your wife rolls her eyes, but her lips twitch, and that's enough to keep you going. You bank the fire, saving the last embers. The hut's freezing, the wind howling like it's mocking your empty pot. You think about the manor house, its warm halls, its tables heavy with food you'll never taste. Bitterness rises, but you swallow it. Envy won't fill your belly, and you've got too much to lose. You pull the kids close, their small bodies warm against yours, and tuck them in. Your wife joins you, her hand finding yours under blanket. The cold's brutal, but her touch is a reminder. You're not alone in this fight. You lie there, staring at the dark, the hunger a dull ache. You think about the spring, when the fields might green again, when the oats might stretch further. Hope's thin this winter, but it's there, buried under frost like a seed waiting for sunlight. You hold on to it, because famine's a test, and you're too stubborn to fail. The village is quiet, the world outside frozen, but in this hut, with your family breathing softly beside you, you find the strength to face another day. You're sitting on a wobbly stool in your hut, the evening air heavy with the damp chill of late autumn. The hearth's embers are fading, and the pot's already scraped clean of tonight's porridge. Same old watery oats, no leak this time. Your stomach's still grumbling. So you reach for the jug of ale on the table, its cloudy, sour smell hitting you before the first sip. This isn't the Lord's fine mead or the monk's honey brew. It's weak, gritty stuff, barely strong enough to dull the hunger. You take a swig, wincing at the bitter kick, and mutter, if this is solace, I'd rather hug a hedgehog. It's a weak joke, but it keeps the gloom from settling too deep. Ale's your lifeline when the porridge runs thin, and the bread's too hard to choke down. It's not just a drink. It's calories, comfort, a way to trick your body into thinking it's fed. You pour another cup, careful not to spill a drop. The jug's low, and brewing more means bartering for barley you can't spare. A mainstream fact, ale was a staple in medieval peasant diets, often safer than water, and provided about 200 to 300 calories per pint, brewed weak for daily drinking by men, women, and even kids. You're no brewer, but you've got a sack of malted barley hidden under the floor, your secret stash for lean days. You swirl the ale, watching bits of sediment dance in the dim light. It's not much, but it's yours, brewed last month with water from the stream, and a prayer it wouldn't turn to vinegar. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed ale could cure a cold if you drank it under a new moon, though you're pretty sure it just makes you sneeze less soberly. You take another sip, the bitterness curling your tongue. It's no feast, but it fills the gaps, those moments when hunger feels like a fist in your gut. You think back to the fields you plowed, the barley you planted, some of which ended up in this jug. It's a small victory, turning dirt into drink. Your wife's across the hut, mending a cloak by the fire's weak glow. The kids are asleep, their soft snores a quiet backdrop. You offer her the cup, and she takes a sip, grimacing. Tastes like regret, she says, and you chuckle. Better than no taste at all, you counter, and she gives you that half smile that makes the cold feel less sharp. The ale's a shared ritual, a moment to lean into each other when the world feels heavy. You pass the cup back and forth, savoring the warmth it brings, even if it's just in your head. The village alehouse crosses your mind, that smoky den where folks gather to drown their aches. You've been there, trading gossip and gripes over a jug. Last week, old Hugh swore his ale made his bad leg feel better, and you all laughed. Probably the ale talking. You'd go tonight, but the jug's too low, and the walk's too long in this chill. Besides, the alehouse is for days when you've got something to trade or a story worth telling. Right now, you've got neither, just this cup and a stubborn will to keep going. Historians still argue whether ale was a blessing or a curse for peasants. Did it nourish or just numb? You'd say both, but tonight, you're leaning toward numb. You take another sip. The ale's bite softening as you get used to it. You think about the bread from the bakehouse, that rock-hard loaf waiting for tomorrow. Dunked in ale, it might go down easier, like a soggy truce between your teeth and hunger. You joke to yourself, if I brew enough ale, maybe I'll forget the porridge. It's a flicker of humor, but it fades fast. The jug's almost empty and winter's looming, when ale becomes a luxury you might not afford. You've seen winters where folks drank boiled snow, too weak to brew anything else. The fire's nearly out now, and you tossing a twig, watching it flare briefly. The hut smells of smoke and barley, a mix that's oddly comforting. You think about the manor house, where the lord's probably sipping spice wine, his table heavy with things you'll never taste. Envy stings, but you wash it down with another gulp. Ale's your rebellion, your way of saying you're still here, still fighting. You glance at your wife, her needle pausing as she yawns. You offer the last of the ale, but she waves it off, so you finish it, the dregs gritty but welcome. You set the cup down, your head buzzing faintly, not from the ale's strength, but from the act of drinking, of choosing to find solace in something. The kids stir in their sleep, and you check their blanket, tucking it tighter. They'll wake up hungry, and you'll face another day of scraping by. But for now, this moment, the empty jug, the dying fire, the quiet, feels like enough. You think back to that leak from the market, how it gave one meal a spark. Ale's the same, a small defiance against the grind. You lean back, the stool creaking, and let the hut's stillness wrap around you. Tomorrow's another round of porridge, fields, and hoping, but tonight, the ale's done its job. It's not much, but it's kept the hunger at bay, kept your spirits from cracking. You whisper to the dark, here's to surviving another day, and the words feel like a toast, even if the jug's empty. You're trudging through the frost-kissed woods at dawn, your breath puffing out in clouds, a woven basket slung over your shoulder. The village is still asleep, but you're out here foraging, hunting for anything, wild herbs, berries, roots, to stretch the meager pot of porridge waiting at home. The ground crunches under your patched boots, and your fingers are numb, but hunger's a sharper spur than the cold. You scan the underbrush, eyes sharp for green amid the gray. You mutter, if I find a mushroom, I'm calling it a feast. It's a half-hearted joke, but out here, where hope's as thin as the morning mist, you take what laughs you can get. The woods are your secret pantry, stingy but free, unlike the Lord's fields or the market's deep barters. You know these paths, where the nettles grow, where the wild garlic hides, where a lucky day might yield a handful of sloes. Today, you're after anything to bulk up the oats, maybe dandelion greens or a few acorns, though they're bitter as a tax collector's smile. A mainstream fact, foraging was a lifeline for medieval peasants, who gathered wild plants, nuts, and berries to supplement diets heavy on grains, especially in lean seasons. It's not glamorous, but it's kept your family from starving more than once. You crouch by a patch of frost-wilted nettles, their leaves still sharp enough to sting through your ragged gloves. You pluck them carefully, dropping them into your basket. They'll make tonight's porridge taste less like despair. Maybe even trick the kids into thinking it's a proper meal. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed eating nettles in spring cleansed the blood, a bit of folklore you half believe, if only because it gives you an excuse to brave the stings. You move on, spotting a cluster of rose hips, red but shriveled. They're tart, tough to chew, but you grab them anyway. Boiled down, they'll add a faint sweetness to pot. The woods are quiet, save for the rustle of leaves and a distant owl's hoot. You're alone, but it's a good kind of alone, away from the village's noise and the bailiff's glare. You think back to that ale you sipped last night. It's sour by the fleeting comfort. Foraging's different. It's active, a hunt for hope in the dirt. You find a patch of wild sorrel. Its lemony leaves a rare prize. You stuff them in your basket, already imagining the kids' faces when they taste something new. You joke to yourself, if I find a truffle, I'm trading it for a castle. Fat chance, but the thought keeps your feet moving. Your stomach growls, loud enough to scare a squirrel up a tree. You haven't eaten since yesterday's porridge, and the bread's being saved for supper. You spot an acorn, then another, and kneel to gather them. They're not much, bitter, hard to process, but you've got a mortar at home, and a few hours of grinding might make them edible. Historians still argue whether foraging was a choice or necessity for peasants. Did you roam the woods for variety, or because the harvest failed again? You'd laugh if you weren't so tired. Necessity's the only reason you're out here, half frozen, chasing weeds. The basket's filling slowly, nettles, rosehip, sorrel, a few acorns. It's not a haul, but it's something. You think about the fields you plowed, the barley you hoped for. The land's stingy, but the woods are stingier, giving just enough to keep you coming back. You spot a clump of mushrooms, small and brown, but hesitate. Some are poison, and you've seen what happens when a neighbor guesses wrong. Sweats, shakes, a quick grave. You leave them muttering, better hungry than dead. It's not really funny, but it's true. The sun's climbing, burning off the mist, and you got to get back soon. The Lord's expecting you in the fields, and being late means a fine you can't pay. You take one last look around, hoping for a miracle, a patch of wild onions maybe, or a forgotten apple. No luck. You sling the basket over your shoulder. It's weight light, but precious. You think about that leak from a market, how it lifted one meal from grim to bearable. These nettles might do the same. If you're lucky, back in the village. The huts are stirring, smoke curling from chimneys. You pass Agnes, hauling water, and she eyes your basket. Found anything good? She asks. You shrug, showing her the nettles. Better than nothing, you say, and she nods, understanding. You're all in this, scavenging for scraps of hope. At home, you set the basket by the hearth. Your wife stirring the morning's porridge, and she raises an eyebrow at your haul. Nettles again, she says. You grin. Gourmet nettles, you reply, and her laugh is worth the stings. You sit, warming your hands by the fire. The kids are up, poking at the basket, curious. You tell them the sorrel's a treat, like the Lord's lemons, and they giggle, believing you for now. The pot's simmering, and you'll add the nettles later, maybe boil the rose hips for a thin tea. It's not much, but it's a fight you're winning one leaf at a time. You think about the woods, how they're both cruel and kind, like the land, like life. You're still here, still foraging, still hoping for a better day. You're standing in the village square, the air alive with rare laughter and the smell of roasting apples. Today's a feast day, St. Martin's, or maybe some saint you've half forgotten, and the village is buzzing like a hive. For once, the grind of porridge and hard bread takes a back seat. There's music, a fiddler scraping out a tune, and tables cobbled together from planks, sagging under communal pots of stew and loaves softer than your usual rock-hard rye. You clutch a wooden cup of spiced ale, stronger than your homebrew, and let the warmth seep into your bones. You mutter, "If every day was a feast, I'd be fatter than the Lord's horse." It's a quiet joke, but the grin on your face is real. Feast days are your chance to dream with a full belly, a brief escape from the hunger that dogs you. The Lord's loosened his grip today, sending a barrel of ale and a few pig for roasting, his generosity, to keep the village praying for his soul. You're not complaining. The smell of crackling pork hits you like a warm hug, and you're already scheming to snag a scrap for the kids. A mainstream fact. Medieval feast days, tied to the church calendar, were vital for peasants, offering rare access to meat, ale, and community, with over 50 such days a year in some regions. You weave through the crowd, your wife beside you, the kids darting ahead to chase a juggler tossing turnips. There's a table with honeyed cakes, sticky and golden, a treat you haven't tasted since last year's harvest festival. You barter a bit of forage sorrel from yesterday's haul for a small cake, splitting it 4 ways. The sweetness hits your tongue like a miracle, and the kids' eyes light up, crumbs on their cheeks. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed honey cakes on feast days brought luck for the next harvest, a superstition you're happy to indulge when the cake's this good. The fiddler tune picks up, and folks start dancing, their boots stomping the mud. You're tempted to join, but your legs are heavy from yesterday's foraging, and you're too busy eyeing the stew pot. It's thick with barley, carrots, and bits of pork, a far cry from your watery porridge. You queue up, bowl in hand, and the cook, a neighbor with a rare smile today, ladles out a portion. You thank her, meaning it, and find a spot to sit, savoring each spoonful. It's rich, warm, almost enough to make you forget the winter looming. You joke, "If I eat another bite, I'll need a new tunic." Your wife snorts and the kids giggle, their faces smeared with stew. The feast isn't just food. It's a flicker of hope, a reminder life's not all toil. You spot Agnes, twirling with her husband, and old Hugh, nursing a cup of ale and actually grinning. Even the priest is here, blessing the food with a speed that says he's eager for seconds. Historians still argue whether feast days were a genuine relief for peasants or just a way for the church and lords to keep you docile. You're leaning toward relief, but only because this stew's clouding your judgment. You take another sip of ale, its spice tingling your throat, and let the moment sink in. The kids run back, begging for another cake, but you shake your head. Sorrel's gone, and you're not trading tomorrow's porridge for more sweets. Instead, you point to the juggler, now balancing a loaf on his nose, and they scamper off, laughing. You lean against your wife, her shoulder warm, and watch the village glow under the afternoon sun. The manor house looms in the distance, its windows dark, but today you don't care. This is your moment, your taste of something better. The stew's gone now, your bowl licked clean, and you're nursing the last of your ale. The fiddler's slowing, the crowd thinning as folks head home with leftovers. Bits of bread, a bone to boil for broth. You got a small chunk of pork wrapped in a cloth, a treasure for tomorrow's pot. You think back to that nettle porridge, how it felt like punishment. Today's different, a day to dream of full tables and soft bread. You joke to yourself, if St. Martin visits weekly, I'm becoming a monk. It's a fleeting thought, but it keeps the spark alive. The sun's dipping, the air turning sharp. You gather the kids, their energy fading, and start to walk home. The village feels lighter, like it's breathing easier. Your wife's humming the fiddler tune, and you join in, off-key but happy. The pork in your pocket is a promise, a way to stretch the feast magic into tomorrow. You think about the fields, the woods, the endless grind waiting. But tonight, with a belly fuller than usual and the kids' laughter still ringing, you let hope take the lead. You're trudging past the manor house, its stone walls looming like a silent taunt, your boots sinking into the mud from last night's rain. The feast day's glow is fading, and you're back to reality, where your diet's thin porridge, hard bread, and the faint hope of something better. You glance at the manor's windows, flickering with candlelight, and imagine the Lord's table. Roast venison, soft wheat loaves, maybe even fruit preserved in honey. Your stomach twists, not just from hunger, but from the sting of what you'll never have. You mutter, "If I sneak a crumb, I'll be the Lord's new footstool." It's a grim joke, but it keeps your feet moving. The manor scraps are a peasant's dream, leftovers that could feed your family for days. You've heard tales of servants slipping bones or bread crust to villagers, but you're not holding your breath. The Lord's generosity stops at feast days, and even then, it's more about a soul than your belly. A mainstream fact. Medieval lords often controlled food distribution, with peasants receiving scraps or broken meats from feasts only as charity, tightly regulated to keep you dependent. Today, you're just passing by, but the thought of those scraps, fatty, flavorful, forbidden, gnaws at you worse than hunger. You pause by the manor's gate, where a kitchen boy's tossing slop to the pigs. The smell hits you, greasy, meaty, a world away from your watery oats. You spot a bone in the pile, still clinging to bits of flesh, and your fingers itch to grab it. But the bailiff's nearby, his eyes sharp as a hawk's, and stealing means a whipping or worse. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believe manor scraps carried the Lord's blessing, making them luckier than market-bought food. You'd settle for the calories, blessed or not, but you keep walking, your basket empty except for yesterday's rose hips. Your wife's at home, probably stirring another pot of porridge, and the kids are waiting for that pork scrap from a feast. You think about that stew, how it warmed you through, and wish you could bring them something half as good. The manor's kitchen is a fortress, guarded by servants loyal to the Lord's coin, not your hunger. You've heard whispers of a cook who trades drippings for favors, but you've got nothing to offer. Your eggs are gone, your herbs too wilted to tempt. You joke to yourself, maybe I'll trade my charm for a sausage. The thought's absurd, but it lightens your step. The village is quiet, the feast day's energy spent. You pass the bakehouse, its chimney cold, and remember that hard loaf waiting at home. It's no manor bread, but it's yours, earned with your own sweat. Historians still argue whether manor scraps were a lifeline or a humiliation for peasants. Did they ease hunger or just deepen servitude? You'd say both. But right now, you'd take the humiliation for a single slice of the Lord's loaf. You shake off the thought, focusing on the path ahead. The mud's deep, your boots heavier with each step, but home's close, and that's enough for now. You think back to the fields, the seeds you planted, the hope you buried in the dirt. The manor's fields are richer, worked by more hands, yielding crops you'll never taste. You've seen the Lord's granary, stuffed with sacks, while yours holds barely a week's worth of oats. Bitterness rises, but you swallow it, like you swallowed so much else. You reach your hut, the familiar smell of smoke and damp straw greeting you. Your wife's at the hearth, the kids playing with sticks, pretending they're knights. You smile, hiding the ache of what you couldn't bring them. You set the basket down, empty but for those rose hips, and pull out the pork scrap from the feast. It's small, greasy, a treasure you've guarded all day. Your wife's eyes light up, and you feel a flicker of pride. Not manor fare, but it'll do, you say, and she nods, already planning how to stretch it into tomorrow's pot. You sit, the stool creaking, and watch her chop the pork, her knife flashing in the firelight. The kids crowd around, sniffing the air like hounds. You tell them a story about a peasant who stole a pie from a lord's table and lived to brag about it. They laugh, and you wish you had half that man's nerve. The porridge is simmering, the pork's fat melting into it, filling the hut with a rare, savory scent. You dunk a piece of yesterday's bread, its crust soft in the broth, and take a bite. It's not the Lord's venison, but it's warm, and the pork's richness is a small rebellion against hunger. You think about the manor again. Its table's heavy with food you'll never touch. But here, in this hut, with this meal, you got something the Lord can't buy. Your family, your fight, your stubborn spark of hope. You lean back. The fire's glow warm in your face. The kids are eating, their chatter filling the silence, and your wife's hand brushes yours. You're tired, hungry, always a step from breaking, but tonight, this meal feels like a win. You joke. If the Lord knew how good this pork is, he'd tax it. Your wife snorts and the kids giggle, and for a moment, the manor's shadow fades. You're here, you're fed, and that's enough to keep the spark alive. You're hunched over the table in your hut, the morning light barely piercing the gloom. A chunk of yesterday's bread in your hand. It's stale, hard as a stone, and you're rationing it like a miser with gold. The porridge pot's empty. Last night's pork fleck broth didn't stretch as far as you'd hoped, and hunger's gnawing at you, a sharp, familiar sting. You break off a crumb, softening in a cup of weak ale, and chew slowly, willing it to fill the void. You mutter, "If I get any hungrier, I'll start eating the table." It's a grim chuckle, but it keeps you from cursing the day before it's begun. Hunger's your constant shadow, a guest who never leaves. You're used to it, but that doesn't make it easier. The kids are still asleep, their thin faces peaceful for now, and your wife's out fetching water, her steps heavy with the same exhaustion you feel. You've got a sack of oats on the floor, but it's dwindling, and winter's not done with you yet. A mainstream fact. Medieval peasants often face chronic hunger, with studies estimating 20 to 30% of their caloric intake came from bread and porridge, leaving little room for variety or excess. Every bite you take is a calculation. How much for today? How much for tomorrow? How much to keep the kids from crying? You break off another crumb, smaller this time, and tuck the rest of the loaf away. You think about the manor scraps, those bones and crusts you passed by yesterday. They're a fantasy, but a dangerous one. Stealing's a risk you can't take, not with the bailiff's whip waiting. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believe hunger could be tricked by chewing on a twig blessed by a priest, claiming it dulled the stomach's ache. You tried it once, and all you got was a splinter and a sour mood. You'd rather save your prayers for a full harvest, though that feels like wishing for wings these days. The kids stir, rubbing their eyes, and you force a smile. Bread for breakfast. You say, breaking off tiny pieces for them. Their hands grab eagerly, and you feel that familiar pang. Guilt, mixed with the stubborn hope they'll grow stronger than you. You take none for yourself, claiming you ate earlier, a lie they're too young to catch. Your wife returns, the bucket sloshing, and sees the bread in their hands. She doesn't say anything, but her look says she knows. You shrug, joking. If we run out, I'll bake a loaf of mud. She rolls her eyes, but her lips twitch, and that's worth more than a full larder. You think back to the feast day, that rare stew and honey cake, now a fading dream. Hunger's sharper after a taste of plenty, like a blade honed on memory. You've seen neighbors give up, their eyes dull, their hands idle. Not you. You got field to work, a family to feed, and a spark that refuses to die. Historians still argue whether hunger drove peasants to rebellion or resignation. Did it spark uprisings or just break spirits? You're proof it's both. But today, you're choosing to fight, one crumb at a time. You stand, brushing crumbs from your tunic, and head for the door. The fields are waiting, and the Lord's bailiff won't care that your stomach's staging a revolt. You grab your sickle, its handle worn smooth by years of use, and step into the cold. The village is stirring, smoke curling from chimneys, and you nod to Agnes, who's hauling a basket of withered turnips. "Surviving," you call. She snorts. "Barely." It's the kind of exchange that binds you, a shared defiance against a hunger that stalks you all. Back home, you know the kids will finish their bread, maybe beg for more. You'll distract them with a story, Maybe the one about a fox who outsmarted a wolf or a loaf. You think about the woods, those nettles and rose hips you foraged. They're not much, but they're a plan, a way to stretch the next pot. You joke to yourself, if I find a berry bush, I'm naming it king. It's a flicker of humor, but it keeps your feet moving through the mud. The manor looms in the distance. Its walls a reminder of the food you'll never taste. But you focus on your own hut, your own fight. The day's long, the hunger sharper with every hour. You work the fields, your body screaming, but you keep going. You think about that bread, how you rationed it, how it's keeping your kids alive. It's not enough, but it's something. You picture the porridge you'll make tonight, maybe with a pinch of sorrel for flavor. It's a small hope, but you cling to it like a seed in frozen ground. The village is quiet as you head home, the sun low, the air biting. You're hungry, tired, but you're here, and that's a victory. You're lined up outside the village church, a crumbling stone building that smells of damp moss and old prayers, your patch cloak barely keeping out the morning chill. The priest doling out alms, charity from the church's coffers, a thin lifeline for folks like you who've got more hunger than hope. Your basket's empty, your stomach's emptier, and you're here for whatever scraps the church can spare. A crust of bread, a handful of dried peas, maybe a blessing to make the hunger sting less. You mutter, if prayers fill bellies, I'd be a saint by now. It's a quiet jab, but it keeps your spirits from freezing solid in this queue. The line's long, full of familiar faces. Agnes, clutching her shawl. Old Hugh, leaning on his stick. Kids with eyes too big for their faces. The church doles out alms once a month, if you're lucky, and it's never enough to go around. You shuffle forward, the mud sucking at your boots, and try not to think about the porridge you didn't have this morning. A mainstream fact. Medieval churches were key sources of charity, distributing food or grain from tithes, but the amounts were often meager, meant to keep peasants alive, not thriving. You're not here for thriving, just surviving. The priest, Father Thomas, stands at the door, his robes cleaner than anything you own. He hands you a small sack of barley, barely enough for a week's porridge, and a stale bread heel, hard as the church's pews. You nod thanks, but his eyes are already on the next person. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed alms bread carried a holy spark, making it luckier than bakehouse loaves. You're skeptical. Bread's bread, and this one's going to need a long soak in ale to be edible, but you tuck it into your basket, grateful for anything that stretches the pot. You step aside, letting others take their turn. The barley's gritty, probably swept from the monastery's floor, but it's better than the nettles you've been boiling. You think back to the pork scrap from the feast day, how it flavored one glorious meal. This barley won't taste like much, but it'll keep the kids' bellies quiet for a few nights. You joke to yourself, if I grind this into gold, I'm buying a cow. It's a fleeting dream, but it warms you as you trudge home. The baskets weigh a small comfort against the hunger gnawing at your ribs. The village is waking, smoke curling from chimneys, but the mood's heavy. Alms Day brings relief, but it's also a reminder of how close you all are to breaking. You pass a neighbor, his sack as small as yours, and exchange a nod. No words needed. You're both fighting the same fight. Historians still argue whether church charity was a true act of mercy or a way to keep peasants tethered to the clergy's power. You'd say it's mercy, but the kind that comes with strings like a hook in a fish's mouth. You're grateful, but you'd rather have fields that yield enough to skip this line. Back home, your wife's at the hearth, stirring a pot of water with a pinch of sorrel from the woods. She sees the barley and bread, and her face softens just a fraction. Enough for a few days, she says, and you nod, setting the basket down. The kids are playing outside, their laughter a sharp contrast to the ache in your gut. You break off a crumb of the alms bread, chewing it slowly. It's tough, gritty, but it's food, and you're not picky. You tell the kids to come in, promising a story about a monk who shared his entire larder with a village. They giggle, believing it, and you wish you could, too. You sit, the stool creaking, and watch your wife pour the barley into a jar. She's careful, every grain accounted for, because losing even one feels like a sin. You think about the manor's granary, stuffed with sacks while you beg for scraps. The thought stings, but you shove it down, focusing on the barley, the bread, the kids' chatter. You joke, if Father Thomas blesses his pot, maybe it'll cook itself. Your wife snorts and the kids laugh. And for a moment, the hut feels less like a battleground. The day stretches ahead. Fields to work, a lord to appease, hunger to outrun. You think about the woods, the market, all the places you've scrounged for food. The church's alms are a drop in the bucket, but they're your drop and you'll make it last. You glance at your family, their faces smudged but alive, and feel that stubborn spark flicker. It's not much, but it's enough to get you through another day, another cue, another fight. You're sitting by the hearth, the fire's weak glow barely pushing back the evening chill, a chip bowl of porridge cooling in your hands. The kids are across from you, their eyes hollow, their spoons scraping at portions smaller than yours. You gave them the lion's share again, like always, hiding your own hunger behind a forced smile. The porridge is thin, oats stretched with water and a pinch of foraged sorrel, and the bread's down to crumbs, too stale to choke down without soaking. You mutter, if I stare at this bowl long enough, maybe it'll turn into stew. It's a tired joke, but it keeps the weight of their gazes from crushing you. Feeding the kids comes first. Always. Their small frames are thinner than last spring, their cheeks sharper, and every bite you skip them feels like a knife in your gut. You've seen what hunger does. Neighbors' children too weak to play, eyes dull like winter skies. Not yours, not yet. A mainstream fact. Medieval peasant children often face malnutrition, with diets lacking protein and vitamins, leading to stunted growth or worse in lean years. You're fighting that fate, rationing every grain to keep their spark alive, even if it means your own ribs show through your tunic. You watch them eat, their spoons moving fast, like they're afraid the porridge will vanish. Your wife's beside you, her own bowl barely touched. She's playing the same game, saving her share for the kids. You catch her eye, and there's a silent pact. You both go hungry before they do. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believe feeding children first brought blessings from the saints, a bit of folklore you cling to, if only to justify the ache in your belly. You nudge the last of your porridge toward your youngest, who takes it without question, and you feel a mix of pride and pain. The hut's quiet, save for the fire's crackle and the kids' soft chewing. You think back to the alms from the church, that meager sack of barley now half gone. It's not enough, but it's something, and you're grateful for every grain. You tell the kids a story to distract them, about a boy who found a magic loaf that never ran out. Their eyes light up, and you wish you could believe in magic, too. You joke, if I find that loaf, I'm hiding from the Lord. They giggle, and your wife's lips twitch, a small victory in this endless fight. Hunger's a thief, stealing strength, sleep, even laughter. You felt it claw at you all day, through the fields, past the manor's taunting walls. Historians still argue whether peasant parents prioritize their children out of love or survival. Did you feed them to ensure the next generation's labor, or because their smiles were your only light? You'd laugh if you had the energy. It's love, plain and simple, though survival's a close second. You look at your kids, their bowls empty now, and feel that stubborn spark flare. They're still here, still fighting, and so are you. You stand, your legs wobbly, and clear the bowls. Your wife's already planning tomorrow's meal. Probably more porridge, maybe with the last of the rose hips. You think about the woods, the market, the church, all the places you've scrounged for scraps. Each one's a battle, but you're winning, barely. You glance at the kids, now curled up on the pallet, their faces softer in sleep. You tuck their blanket tighter, your hands rough but gentle. You joke to yourself, if I could eat their dreams, I'd be full. It's a quiet thought, but it keeps the dark at bay. The fire's dying, and you bank the embers, saving them for morning. Your wife joins you, her shoulder brushing yours, and you sit in the silence, the hut cold but not empty. You think about the feast day, that fleeting taste of stew and the manor scraps, always out of reach. Hunger's heavy, but love's heavier, and you've got enough of that to keep going. You lean back, the stool creaking, and let the stillness settle. Tomorrow's another day of rationing, another day of giving more than you take. But for now, the kids are fed, and that's enough. You're lying on your straw pallet. The night's cold seeping through the thin blanket, the hut quiet except for the soft snores of your kids and the distant howl of wind outside. The fire's down to a faint glow, its embers winking like stars you can't reach. Your stomach's empty. Tonight's porridge was barely a whisper, and the last of the bread's gone, crumbs swept up for the kids. But you're not thinking about hunger now. You're clinging to resolve, that quiet, stubborn thing that's kept you going through fields, famines, and fleeting feast days. You whisper to the dark, if I survive till spring, I'm planting a whole damn forest. It's a soft joke, but it's yours, a spark to carry into sleep. The day's been long, plowing, foraging, rationing scraps to keep your family breathing. You think about the kids, their hollow eyes brighter when they ate tonight, and your wife's hand warm against yours despite the chill. Resolve's what gets you up each morning, what makes you stir that watery pot, what keeps you from cursing the Lord, the land, the sky itself. A mainstream fact. Medieval peasants often survived on sheer resilience, with community and family bonds providing the emotional strength to endure chronic hardship. You're proof of that, lying here, too tired to move but too stubborn to break. Your mind drifts to the woods, those nettles you plucked, the rose hips that flavored one meal. You think about the market, the church's alms, the feast day stew, each a small defiance against hunger. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believe sleeping with a sprig of thyme under their pillow brought dreams aplenty. You've got no time, but you're dreaming anyway, of fields green with barley, of a table heavy with bread, of your kids laughing without that edge of hunger. It's a dream you'll chase tomorrow, when the sun rises and the grind begins again. You shift, the straw crackling, and feel the ache in your bones. You think back to that leak from the market, the pork scrap from the feast, the barley from the church. Each was a victory, however small, and you strung them together like beads on a thread of resolve. Historians still argue whether peasant resilience was born of faith, fear, or just necessity. Did you endure because of God, survival, or something deeper? You'd say it's the kids' faces, your wife's quiet strength, the way hope refuses to die even when the larder's bare. You're too tired for debates, but you're still here, and that's answer enough. The hut's dark now, the embers fading. You pull the blanket tighter. Your wife's warmth a quiet anchor beside you. You joke to yourself, if I dream of a full pot, I'm eating the whole thing. It's a fleeting thought, but it softens the night's edge. You think about tomorrow, more fields, more hunger, more fighting for every bite. But you'll face it, because resolve's stronger than hunger, stronger than cold, stronger than the Lord's taxes. You close your eyes, the kid snores a gentle rhythm, and let the quiet take you. Wind down. As the night deepens, the hut settles into a softer stillness, the wind's howl fading to a whisper. You're drifting now, the way of the day slipping away like water through your fingers. The kids are safe, their small chests rising and falling, and your wife's breath is steady, a quiet promise you're not alone. The hunger's still there, a dull ache, but it's soft in the dark, less sharp when you're wrapped in this moment. Picture the fields outside, sleeping under frost, waiting for spring's gentle touch. You'll walk them again, sowing seeds, chasing hope, because that's who you are. Stubborn, steady, unbroken. The fire's gone out, but its warmth lingers in your mind, a glow to carry into dreams. Let the night hold you. Let the resolve settle deep and rest, knowing tomorrow's fight is one you've won before. Sleep now, softly, sweetly, carried on a humble world that's still turning.